In the last section, we introduced this concept of law of demand, which we said is the building block of this entire model of demand and supply that we constructed in the last section. Now, although this law of demand is the building block of this model, but this is really a very, very simplistic way of thinking about the way in which the consumers of a product react to changes in the price. That is what law of demand tells us. But what it says is something so obvious that most of us as consumers, we can relate to it. Because law of demand simply says that, look, if the price of a product decreases, if a product becomes cheaper, then the consumers will wish to buy more of it. And using the terminology of this model of demand and supply, we say that then the price decreases, the law of demand tells us that the quantity demanded will increase. So a very, very simple way of explaining the consumer's reaction to changes in price. And economists, they realize that, look, this is a very, very simple thing over here, and they recognize the limitation of this law of demand by saying that this simple idea is just a directional concept. In the sense that if the price of a product decreases, this law of demand just tells you that the quantity demanded will increase. It tells you the direction of change in quantity demanded. But then it doesn't say anything about the more important question of by how much will this quantity demanded increase? Will it increase just a little bit? Will it increase a lot? This law of demand is totally silent about this question of the amount or magnitude of change in quantity demanded when the prices change. Which is, of course, if anything, the more important question, in the sense that think of yourself as a producer. If I come and tell you that, look, lower the price, quantity demanded will increase. If I tell you the direction of change, that won't be very helpful because you would ideally want to know by how much. If I give a discount, will I just get a couple of more customers, or will there suddenly be a long queue of customers? Will this quantity demanded change a little or a lot? And to answer this question of the magnitude of change in quantity demanded and to get some insight as to by how much the quantity demanded changes in response to changes in price, we introduced this concept of price elasticity of demand, or what I will be calling simply PED to avoid saying this whole long thing again and again. Now, PED, first and foremost, remember, is a mathematical concept. You can calculate the value of price elasticity of demand using a simple formula for every product. And just by looking at the value of that PED, economists, they are able to tell whether the quantity demanded of a product will it respond or change a little bit or a lot to changes in price. But before I go into any maths, I want you to ensure that you understand the entire economic meaning behind this concept of price elasticity of demand. Because the maths on its own is useless. Maths, remember, I always tell you, it's there to make the economics easy for you. So before we go to the maths, let me explain the economics of price elasticity of demand, and then we'll see how we can think about all of that economics in a mathematical way. Now, elasticity in general, outside of economics, when you hear this word elasticity, the sort of thing that comes to your mind, or that should come to your mind, is something like a rubber band. So let's assume we have a rubber band over here. Now the thing with this rubber band is that if you hold this from both its ends and then apply a little bit of force in opposite directions, then what will happen to this rubber band? Of course, it will stretch. It will elongate, it will change its length, it will respond. And that is why we say that something like a rubber band that responds to forces that are applied onto it, we say that something like this is elastic. Now, the meaning of elasticity in economics is very, very similar. When we talk about price elasticity of demand, we are going to study how we can measure the responsiveness of demand to changes in price. So price is the force, that's the thing that is being applied onto demand, and we want to study, is the demand responsive like a rubber band or not? And then we are going to talk about a lot of different elasticities. We are going to talk about price elasticity of supply, income elasticity of demand, and a few more elasticities. Every time you see this word elasticity in economics, you will see something to the right and then to the left. So price elasticity of supply, we are going to see how we can study the amount of response or change of quantity supplied when prices change. Income elasticity of demand, we are going to try and measure the amount of change in demand when incomes of the consumers change. So that is generally how you think about all the different elasticities that we are going to encounter. Now, as far as the details of price elasticity of demand are concerned, and let me just get rid of all of this over here as well. So again, remember, the way you think about price elasticity is that every product, as I said, has its own PED, and what you do as economists is that you observe any changes in price of the product, and given the price changes, given a change in price, you observe that how is the quantity demanded changing, how are the consumers reacting. And if you see that the quantity demanded, given a change in price, if you see that the quantity demanded changes a lot, then you consider the demand of the product to be elastic. It's like a rubber band. It changes, it responds, it stretches quite a lot when the price changes. Whereas if you observe that given a change in price, if you see that the quantity demanded changes, but it changes just a little bit, then you consider the demand of such a product to be inelastic. It's not like a rubber band. It does not respond, it does not change a lot. Now, a common mistake that most of you would do in your MCQs is that you would, when you see inelastic demand, you would think that the quantity demanded is not changing. That is wrong. Quantity demanded, remember, it will always change if price changes. It will change according to the law of demand. So, for instance, if price increases, the quantity demanded, it will fall. Inelastic demand is only telling you that it will fall just a little bit. Whereas if demand is elastic, that tells you it will fall or change a lot. So that's the first thing that you always need to make sure that you are clear about. Now, the next thing, and some of you might be wondering about this already, is that, how much of change in quantity demanded is going to be considered to be a lot of change and therefore elastic demand, and what is a little bit of change, as in what is the benchmark that we use. Now, to see that, let me just give you an example over here. So let's say that we have a market of mobile phones over here, where initially the price is 100 and then it increases to 140. And as a result, let's say quantity demanded falls from 10,000 to 7,000 units. Now, this is where to decide whether this is a lot of change and therefore elastic demand, or a little bit of change and therefore inelastic demand, the way we think about these changes as being a lot or a little is that we avoid making any personal guesses. We don't want personal opinions that I think this is a lot of change, somebody else may think this is a little bit of change. So what we do in economics is that we always make this decision of whether a certain change in quantity is a lot or a little by comparing the percentage change in the price of the product with the percentage change in the quantity demanded. And if we find out that the percentage change in quantity demanded is greater than the percentage change in price, then we consider the demand to be elastic. And if we observe that the percentage change in quantity demanded is less than the percentage change in price, then we consider the demand to be inelastic. And then we have a third case also. This is where, given a change in price, if we see that the quantity demanded changes what we say proportionately. Now, a long word but an important word, you will see this in your exams. If quantity demanded changes proportionately, then we say that the demand of a product is unitary elastic. Now, a proportionate change means neither a lot of change nor just a little bit of change, somewhere in between. Now, exactly, we can define proportionate change in quantity demanded and therefore a unitary elastic demand as a case when the percentage change in quantity demanded is equal to the percentage change in price. Now this third, which I often call the weird in-between case, is the one that you will see very often in your MCQs. So always remember all of these three different elasticities, but especially this unitary elastic case, percentage change in quantity and price, they are exactly the same. And before I move on, I just want to stress and make sure that you realize and always remember that this entire concept of elasticity, it always revolves around comparing the percentage changes in some two variables. So never do the mistake of just thinking about absolute change in price. So absolute change in price is 40 rupees here, and the absolute change in quantity is just 3,000 units over here. So don't look at these numbers and try to figure out whether this is a lot of change or a little bit of change. There's a standardized way. You will always have to compare the percentage change of price with the percentage change of quantity. So those are the first few basics that you need to know, which are important. And then the next thing that I want to do before I give you the maths is that I also want you to sort of start developing from the very beginning a certain specific way of thinking about this whole concept of elasticity, so that your thinking is exactly in line with what the A-level exam asks you. And what I want you to do from now on is that whenever you read that a certain product's demand is elastic, then the first image that should come to your mind is that, look, the consumers of this product are sensitive and they are touchy to price changes. They will respond and they will react if prices change. So if producers, they increase the price only a little bit, the consumers will react. Elastic demand, quantity demanded will fall. That is what law of demand tells us. But elastic demand is telling us it will fall a lot. Consumers are touchy, they are sensitive to price changes. And similarly, if you give a discount or a sale or lower the price on a product with elastic demand, the quantity demanded will suddenly increase a lot. So sensitive, touchy consumers if you hear the word elastic demand of a product. On the other hand, if you read that the demand of a product is inelastic, the first image that should come to your mind is that the hands of the consumers of this product are tied. The consumers is in a tight spot. Why? Because you do whatever you want to do with prices. Inelastic demand tells you the quantity demanded, it won't change a lot. For some reason, consumers, they can't stop using this product. So think of a product like cigarettes. Habit-forming addictive products usually have inelastic demand, meaning that even if the price increases, quantity demanded may fall, but it will fall just a little bit. And similarly, think of VAPD or electricity utility companies. They increase the price quite often. Why? Because they know the consumers' hands are tied. They can't stop using electricity. Their demand is inelastic. They may use a little bit less, but quantity demand will fall just a little bit. Inelastic demand. The hands of the consumers are tied. So that is how you are supposed to sort of, think in knowing the economic meaning of all of these things, and you will be very comfortable with anything that is thrown at you in your A-level exams. Now, once you know these basics and you understand what this whole thing of elasticity is all about, let me now give you the maths behind this whole concept.